Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you've had a fantastic day with us. I've certainly been in some great sessions and I had some great conversations. And it's been really good just to see the community in action again. So, as Chris said, we've been posing questions, or you've been posing questions to us. Over the last few weeks, we opened a web form and allowed you to submit questions about what you wanted to know around the future of ArcGIS. And then I committed to answering as many of them as I can, and certainly the most common themes and common questions as part of this Road Ahead session. So let's take a look at some of the things that have come out. And the first one, I suspect, will be no surprise. As one of the key themes that we've been talking about today, it's all about the area of AI. How can ChatGPT affect GIS? What AI can we expect? And how will AI complement our interaction with WebGIS? Now, we saw this morning how we can use smart assistants to help us become more productive and to help us work smarter. And one of the examples that Emma shared was around creating that survey with the Survey 123 assistant. But what we didn't really show you was how we can actually use some of these AI assistants. And of course, ChatGPT is an example of something that's just like this, which is why that's relevant here. But how can we use some of these AI assistants to actually do some GIS? And to help highlight some of the things that we're thinking about, I wanted to share a quick video with you. It's about a minute and a half long. And it really starts to talk about how we can integrate some of this with WebGIS for workflows. The context here is that we have loaded this housing units data from the Living Atlas into a smart AI assistant, and we'll pick up the story from there.
Now, let's go ahead and load this layer into an app that contains a mapping assistant. And I'm going to go ahead and ask this assistant a question to style my data. So I'm going to ask it to create a map that shows the percentage of homes built before 1939. And in a matter of seconds, I get a result. And what's going on here? The assistant takes a look at that field metadata, and it tries to find, based off of all of those aliases and descriptions, the field that I want based off what I asked it to do. And as we can see in the legend, this did a pretty good job of identifying the field that I wanted. And not only that, it picked a style, a choropleth map, that is suitable for this data. Not only does the assistant help me identify the data I want, but I can also specify specific mapping parameters, such as color ramps. So I'm going to ask it to create the same map, but this time using a color ramp, and it does exactly what I want. Now, something I want to emphasize here is that while the assistant is helping me get started with styling my data, I still maintain full control over that styling. So I'm going to open the Smart Mapping panel and make some adjustments that suit my needs. Now, let's go ahead and ask it one more question here. I'm going to ask it to create a dot density map that shows the decade in which homes were built between 1939 and 2010. And again, in a matter of seconds, it gave me exactly what I wanted. And the remarkable thing here is that I didn't have to list any of these fields out or its aliases. I gave it a date range, and it knew which fields to find. And then it created the style with a very nice color ramp.
OK, so what we've seen there is integrating a smart AI assistant with some data from the Living Atlas, but not doing that in a way that is different from the WebGIS tools that we already have. But actually, particularly coming to this last question here, really complementing that interaction with WebGIS, driving the smart mapping tools in a way that gives us still full control. You notice the way that you could tweak the smart mapping control. It's subtle. But that's the principle of how we're starting to integrate generative AI with WebGIS. It's about helping us use what we have at our disposal and mine the information and all of the rich capability that we have in software to start helping us do things smarter. So that's some of what you can expect to see in the future. Let's look at some of the other themes then. Here's another question. Why is Esri focusing on ArcGIS Online more? And rather than ArcGIS Pro, we use desktops more, and we're concerned that everything's on the cloud and desktop disappearing. And then another question that came in from somebody else was this one. So will there come a time where you bring all the advanced capabilities of Pro into online? the analysis tools in MapViewer feels like a big step in this direction. And the reason I like these two questions, and I've put them on the same slide, is, of course, they're opposite sides of the same coin. So here we've got, a user who's particularly using our desktop tools, ArcGIS Pro, concerned about the future of online and cloud, and somebody on the other side of the coin saying, well, actually, that's what I'm waiting for, and that's what I really want. So let's start to pick a way through this. The first thing I want to say is ArcGIS Pro is not going anywhere. It's a really, really important tool set for us and for many, many of you. It's our professional desktop GIS, and it has an active roadmap, and we're continuing to develop new capabilities for it, and we'll look at that in a minute or so. But something I said this morning, which I think is increasingly true, is that the nature of professional GIS is changing, and no longer are we using one set of tools to do everything. In fact, when I invite Matthew and Helena up in a few minutes, you're going to see an application which is specifically designed on the web to take advantage of the capabilities in a browser, and it can actually do some things faster, more efficiently than we can do in desktop tools. And that's a good example of why we need a variety of different approaches to solve problems. The other thing is that ArcGIS Online has been incredibly successful at lowering the barrier for entry, both in terms of cost and complexity, and helping a broader audience access geospatial approaches. There are lots and lots of people here today who are well skilled in driving ArcGIS Pro, but not everybody is. And so we want to create workflows and approaches that are accessible to many people as well. So we're invested and we're committed to both approaches. Will there come a time where you bring all the advanced capabilities of Pro to online? I don't know about all of them, but absolutely that is our trajectory of travel, is to look at how do we bring workflows that are tied up in historic or complex approaches into the light, into simpler ways of working. But we're not doing this, for example, in the way that Microsoft have chosen to do it. You won't see a web version of Pro like you can get a web version of Microsoft Word. But actually, it's more about looking at how do we bring some of the workflows and approaches and simplify them, because the browser is such an important leveler. So, like I said, we're not doing this at the expense of Pro, and actually here is the Pro roadmap from about 6, 7, 8 months ago. And some of you will know we released Pro 3.3 just a few days ago, and actually introduced about 70, 80% of the things that are on the near-term list there. And obviously you can see there's a mid-term and a long-term list of areas for development as well. So there's an active roadmap. In fact, one of the things that released just last week is flood simulation modeling. So this is a bunch of new geoprocessing tools and visualizations to allow you to do that. Something that didn't release yet, but is in the roadmap, it will probably be in the next version or perhaps the one after, is the ability to do presentations natively inside Pro. So that's ability to build slides and configure presentations and deliver them. So look out for that. Another thing we're working on is an ArcGIS Pro Copilot. So you've seen today generative AI assistance in action in the browser, but if you're a Pro user, we don't want you to miss out on that. And obviously, Pro has all of this capability, rich capability that we want to be able to use AI assistance to drive as well and ask natural language questions inside Pro. So that is coming as well. Okay. What's the future relationship between ArcGIS Enterprise and ArcGIS Online for organizations using solely cloud-based infrastructure? Great question. So we're committed at Esri to having both approaches. So you've got ArcGIS Online, which is software as a service, and ArcGIS Enterprise, which is self-hosted. And they're both important. And we're going to continue to develop both options. And actually, they're great partners as well. ArcGIS Pro and ArcGIS Enterprise work really well together. They share an API, right? So if you build applications on top of Online and you build them on top of Pro, you're writing the same code, you're calling the same APIs. And if the capabilities underneath align, then you can transfer them between as well. You can connect ArcGIS Enterprise and ArcGIS Pro together with distributed collaboration. You can start to share and interact and collaborate amongst both technologies. Both of them are cloud optimized. So ArcGIS Online as SaaS, of course, is natively cloud. ArcGIS Enterprise, you can deploy it in the cloud on Windows and Linux, or you can deploy it on Kubernetes in a cloud-native space. So there really are very strong options for you if this is you and you are taking a cloud-first approach. Another question came in that was related to this as well. Will ArcGIS Online support connecting to cloud database instances in future? Well, actually, you can do that today. So ArcGIS data pipelines allows you to ingest data into ArcGIS Online from Amazon S3, from Microsoft Azure, from Google BigQuery, and also from Snowflake. So I'd absolutely recommend that you start there. Pipelines is a good example of how we've started to simplify some of those workflows that you would have previously had to write code for and bring them into a configurable interface, which is a little bit like Model Builder, and you can start to chain things together. If you want to ingest data from somewhere that isn't on that list of platforms that I just talked about, then you can go to ArcGIS Notebooks, and that's a Python environment that you can start to write code and ingest data from where you need to. Both notebooks and pipelines are both schedulable as well. So if you need to refresh that data, then you have an option to do that. But I would certainly suggest check out data pipelines first. Okay, we had an email about new user types. What's the main driver behind this? So of course, we talked a lot about this morning, didn't we? And I don't want to go over all of that ground again. But just to address this question directly, the main driver behind it is about simplifying our licensing model and making it easier to access and easier to understand. And if I look at it through the lens of a new organization coming to ArcGIS, it's going to be way easier for me to understand that I've got 6 levels of users and to understand what comes with each level, rather than having to get my head around, complex licensing of dozens and dozens of products. So that is the primary driver. And actually, we're looking at ways to continue to do this, and we need to do that carefully because we don't want to create disruption and uncertainty. But absolutely, that's one of our focus areas is how do we continue to make the understanding of licensing simple. Okay, is there a possibility of merging the capabilities of dashboards and Experience Builder to make a one-stop shop for app creation? So this is a really interesting question, and when I was thinking about this, I think the idea of a one-stop shop is often a nice idea in theory, but in my experience, it can also lead to complexity. And if we think back a while and you look at things like ArcMap, we have a product which was incredibly capable, but also had lots of complexity. And actually, over the last 10 years, what we've been doing at Esri is trying to build apps that target specific types of work and then put those in the hands of individuals that can make use of those for those targeted reasons. And if you're building applications on the web using WebGIS, I'd encourage you to adopt the same types of approaches. Having said that, if you were in this room for the session before, you'll have seen Izzy provide a brilliant answer to this question and show how you can actually start to embed dashboards inside Experience Builder and start to link those things up as well. So if you did ask this question and you didn't see that session, do check it out online afterwards, because that might be the answer you're looking for. Okay, we've probably got time for just about one more, and then I will hand over to Helena and Matthew. So is ArcGIS a digital twin, and how are you developing it? Okay, so look, here's my reflection on this. I don't think ArcGIS itself is a digital twin, but what ArcGIS allows us to do is build digital twins. And if you were here last year, you'll have seen some of our thinking on this. We've been doing a lot of work internally and also externally with other organizations, thinking about what does it mean to build a digital twin, and what does that mean in different sectors and for different organizations. And one of the things that we found is that it's not a one-size-fits-all thing. And again, we've had a couple of sessions on digital twin today. If you were in the back room earlier, you'll have seen University of Warwick taking you through their experience on this. And they showed this maturity model, which we talked about last year, reflecting that actually, there are a variety of different types of digital twin, and there's a level of maturity in terms of working out where you are and where you want to be. You don't need to all be at the top, but actually, what is it that fits the bill for you? This involves, data capture. If you capture data and you have that data, it's a digital representation of a physical environment. That's a valid digital twin. But from there, we can start to visualize and interrogate that data. Again, you might have seen Tash in the back session presenting visual digital twins earlier in 2D and 3D. Then we can start to analyze data, and then as we do that, we can start to model different environments and scenarios, which helps us to make better decisions through analysis. Integrating real-time data can be really, really important, and we talked about this a little bit earlier around living digital twins in areas like transport. If you imagine, in fact, right now, You will have all heard, I'm sure, about some of the work that's going on the M25 and that Wisley Interchange Junction being closed over a number of weekends. Well, there was a news article just a few days ago around 2 different diversion routes, one for heavy goods vehicles and one for cars, and the wrong vehicles are using the wrong routes, and it's creating a challenge. Being able to model what happens if I close this road and divert traffic in that direction versus the other direction in real time, really important ability for lots and lots of scenarios. And then moving on from that, having digital twins be able to start to actually take actions for themselves or suggest activities based on bringing together all of the information that they hold. And beyond that, really, this vision of being able to connect disparate data sets from lots of different organizations and different sectors and to create this idea of a living, breathing digital twin that can actually take actions and preserve state and make decisions all on its own. I don't think we're there yet, but this is the vision of where we want to be. So really coming back to the question, is ArcGIS a digital twin? No, ArcGIS isn't. But actually, all of the things that you use ArcGIS for, you are building digital twins of the world, of the natural and the built environment. Not every digital twin is a GIS, but every GIS is a digital twin plotted somewhere along that maturity model. Okay, so I hope that was helpful answering your questions about what you wanted to know around the future of ArcGIS. But now I want to hand over to Helena and to Matthew, and they're going to take us through some of our vision about what we're thinking for the future of ArcGIS.
Thank you, Mark. Innovation is a cornerstone of our technology, and in our current age of rapid technological growth, we're constantly hearing about the latest and greatest tech that is going to change the world as we know it. But what makes tech truly innovative? For us, it's a careful balance of technological advancements and a vision of purpose. Without this, the consequences can range from simply creating tech for tech's sake to actually doing more harm than good. Now, whilst this balance is needed to build sustainable tech, that's not to say that either of these principles can't act on their own as a catalyst for creation. So for this year's Road Ahead, we are going to show you 3 applications that showcase the balance of these defining principles of innovation. Our 3 apps shine light on some of the advances that have been made in web-based technologies. These technologies power the way that we work over the internet and have come a long way in both performance and capability in the last few years. This has been reflected in things like your browsers, ArcGIS Online capabilities, and also in our own developer technologies. They've brought new and dynamic ways of working with our data and are unlocking new insights about the world it represents. So we're going to show you a few concept applications that tell this story. But first, a little history lesson. The west coast of Scotland was once an industrial hotspot for things like arms manufacturing, shipbuilding, and chemical production. But as you can imagine, these activities are not the kindest on our landscape. So I'm going to explore the effects that they've had. I'll start with the aerial imagery that you see on screen to get the lay of the land around Irvine, which is an industrial hotspot here. But as you can imagine, a lot has changed and nature has taken back so much, so it's difficult to see anything with clarity. So I'm going to switch to a digital terrain model here, which allows me to see beneath the buildings and vegetation to the surface. But the lower elevations are still fairly clouded. So how am I going to fix this? Well, one of the things I can do is I can take down the maximum symbolized elevation from 400 to 100. And as this renders, my perspective begins to change. But as you'll soon see, the areas around Irvine are just not quite clear enough for our purposes. So with a little trial and error, which is something I don't have time for right now, I'm sure I'd be able to represent relief quite nicely in a few select areas. But for now, I think I'm going to need something that's a bit quicker and a little bit more dynamic. Now don't get me wrong, ArcGIS Pro is immensely powerful, and especially for performing a huge range of tasks. But sometimes what you need is a very specific app for a very specific purpose. With this vision in mind, we have created the DTM Explorer, which takes advantage of the new JavaScript SDK capabilities to enable ultra-fast rendering for terrain modeling. So I'm going to open up my DTM Explorer, and as you can see, I have our original DTM of the North Ayrshire coast. Again, the hills to the north are well defined, and the coast still doesn't quite have enough detail for our purpose. But by adjusting the slider over on the left, I can bring down the maximum elevation that gets symbolized. And as I do, I can zoom into Irvine and see that we have a lot more detail now. And we can see these little mysterious earth donuts that have appeared here. These actually belong to Alfred Noble's first UK dynamite factory. It's derelict now, but it was actually one of the largest of its kind in the world. So this just goes to show how through a closer study of our landscape, we can see the secrets of our history revealed, just as they were in the opening plenary this morning. So if I zoom out here, I've created what I think is quite a pretty picture, but that's not just what this app is about. When we first started developing this, we thought it was going to be a great tool for symbolizing imagery quickly. It wasn't until we started playing around with it that we realized that the rendering is happening so quickly that it's transforming your static imagery into something with motion that can be interacted with. So let's take a closer look at this. I'm going to zoom out and I'm going to head to the coast over here. I'm going to change our color ramp to blue and red, pop on a blend mode, and bring gamma all the way down. Now, for those of you wondering, gamma just adds a little bit of emphasis to our color. And let's zoom to Penny Cook. And just watch as we spill the ink over this town. Now, it's so mesmerizing, sometimes I have to remind myself that all this is just elevation represented in color, just done very, very quickly. But as this is real-world data, it can, of course, be used to understand real-world issues. So let's zoom out again and head over to the north. I'm going to change our color ramp to something that's a bit more water suitable. So let's go with blue, turn off our blend mode, and then pop our gamma back up. As I move this, we can watch as the blue drains back to the sea. And as it does, it reveals the network of rivers and streams that make up this region's drainage basin. So, heading away from this watery world, and with an enhanced understanding of the dynamic nature of landscape, I'm going to hand over to Matthew, who will take you through quite a different application inspired by a vision for empowering users with dynamic generalization.
Thank you, Helena. So, like many of the innovations, including some of those we've seen today, DTM Explorer came about because of continuous enhancements in ArcGIS web-based technology. DTM Explorer was a direct result of technological advancement, but has subsequently unlocked a new and quite beautiful way of exploring data. The next app, on the other hand, came about first as a vision for a better way to perform data generalization. For many years, it was not possible to achieve. Performance improvements only recently allowed us to realize this vision. Now, I'll show you what I mean in a minute, but first, you might be asking, what is generalization? So, generalization is the practice of simplifying detailed data to improve performance and enhance visualization. So the way it's traditionally been achieved is to create and store separate layers of data to represent the world at different scales or zoom levels. Wouldn't it be great if we could just stick with one layer, representing the world at its most detailed, and then just let an app decide what to generalize? It's a bit of an abstract concept, I know, so let me give you an example. Edinburgh Waverley train station boasts a whopping 20 platforms linked by a complex array of tracks or switches and serviced by a range of amenities. Now, I've got my highly detailed data here, and at this zoom level, it's quite useful. As I zoom out, though, my picture quickly becomes congested. I'm no longer able to make out individual rails, but unnecessarily, they are still there. So this is life without generalization, and it's not exactly pretty. So I'll zoom back in and turn some generalization on. And now as I zoom out, my data becomes more general. So what I've brought for you today is a proof of concept for dynamic generalization. This is an innovation that eliminates the need for much of the authoring and data management that goes into traditional generalization, as all my data, except for the highly detailed stuff, is being redrawn on the fly. Now, I'll let you have another look, and I'll exaggerate the generalization this time, just so that it happens earlier and we get a good look at the action. So, as I zoom out once, individual rails are removed, leaving only lines to each platform and some of the major switches. Zooming out again, my tracks and buildings merge, leaving only lines to each platform and some very rough building outlines. Zooming out, my app draws a very basic station outline before drawing everything at its most general, a single line with a point. Now, except for the highly detailed data, I haven't had to author any of this. It's all been generalized on the fly from a single data set. Now, if you're not already convinced, I'll show you another example of just how powerful this approach can be. So the world changes rapidly. I'm sure you don't need me to tell you that. But because it does, our maps and data must change quickly too. At Perth Station, for example, as you can see on screen, there are fictional plans to extend the main building and construct a new hotel to cater to increased tourism. Now, naturally, we need to digitize these changes. Taking a traditional approach would require me to incorporate it into at least a handful of other layers. Using the dynamic approach, I only need to draw them once. So I'll head into our trusty map viewer and draw in my hotel. Now, I'm going to be very rough about this and draw in quite a modern building outline and apply some basic attribution. And wait a moment for that change to be applied. Now, heading back into the app, give it a moment, we'll see that that change has been incorporated into each stage of the generalization process. And all I've had to do is edit the most highly detailed data set, and the app has taken care of the rest. So what Helena and I have shown you with DTM Explorer and dynamic generalization are examples of the innovations that can take place when vision is combined with technological advancement.
Yet there's another critical aspect of innovation we haven't discussed yet, and that's responsibility. Innovations of the past can evolve into the challenges of today if we're not careful. Consider the CFCs once used in aerosol sprays, which have led to ozone depletion, asbestos, which has since been linked to multiple adverse health effects, and radioactive radium, which was used to make watch faces glow. To avoid repeating past mistakes like this, we must adopt a responsible and sustainable approach to innovation, not just at Esri, but in the broader GIS community, especially given that one of the largest challenges facing us today is the growing climate emergency. And it's in this context that the rapidly increasing carbon cost of computing needs to be tackled. Now, with that in mind, I'm going to hand back over to Matthew, who'll show you an application that embodies this commitment to responsible innovation.
So ArcGIS is becoming more sustainable every year. How it works with our data is becoming more and more efficient. Nevertheless, there are things that we as users can do to ensure our organizations, maps and workflows are running as sustainably as possible. So to demonstrate this, I've built a proof of concept assistant to help my ArcGIS Online organization to become more sustainable. So, as I head into Eco Assistant, you should hopefully see from the bar at the top that my organization is not very optimized. So to understand why this is, I can dig through my layers, maps, scenes, and notebooks to find the root of this cause. I'll start with layers. Now, reducing data storage is an easy way to streamline our organizations, make them more sustainable, as well as save on some credits. Now, I can see here that I've got a lot of layers that have not been utilized in the last 60 days. So I can quickly get rid of some of these. And as I do so, the bar at the top starts to fill up, and my proportion of underutilized layers goes down. And for those of you worrying about dependencies, fear not, I've already checked there are none here. Now, I'll get the rest of these later, but now I'll have a look at web maps. So with web maps, the situation is slightly more complex, where it's the cartographic choices we make that impacts compute and data transfer needed to create a map, and thus the energy required to create it. So as you can see, some of my web maps are more optimized than others. Let's have a look at this one with another cool tool of Eco Assistant. So this has brought me into the map viewer, albeit map viewer with a bit of a twist, in that Eco Assistant is here too. So my assistant has already identified some sustainability gains that I could make, like aligning my coordinate systems, reducing data density, and enabling some caching. Let's look at this humble tool in the middle though, the scale threshold, as it offers significant benefit when it comes to web map optimization. So by only showing the stuff we need to see when we need to see it, we are reducing data volume and data complexity, thus minimizing the energy required for transfer and rendering. So I'll apply some auto scale thresholds. So now that I zoom out, my data is replaced by simplified versions of it. So I'll hit save and head back into my dashboard, and we'll see that my meter is almost up at a third. A bit of work to do after this demo, I think. But for now, I'll take a look at notebooks. So the running of a notebook consumes energy, so wouldn't it be great if we could schedule our notebooks to run only at times when this energy is from renewable sources? Well, with Eco Assistant, I can. So I've got this notebook at the top that I'm using to process customer requests. At the moment, it's scheduled to run at an arbitrary time every Thursday morning. So clicking this button will take me into my Eco wizard for scheduling my notebooks. Here, I'll ask for a weekly schedule, and then clicking save, we'll now see that this notebook is on an Eco schedule. Now, we've created Eco Assistant to chart a course towards greater environmental sustainability in ArcGIS online content. This proof of concept represents not just a tool, but a vision for a greener future. And although it may take some time before it reaches your WebGIS, rest assured that we will be collaborating with our friends in the US to help us realize this vision.
So, in our first two applications, we showcased how the latest technological advancements, paired with a specific vision of purpose, can create truly innovative apps that empower our users to go further with their spatial data. Our third app, the Eco Assistant, highlighted the importance of building sustainability into innovation, so that the tech of today does not become the challenge of tomorrow. Thank you, and we'll be handing back over to Jess.